Hi, and welcome to Ed Talks. My name is Olu Awosoga, and I am the current Board of Governors Teaching Chair at the University of Lethbridge. I want to start by giving the territorial acknowledgement. Okay, the University of Lethbridge Blackfoot's name is Ineski, meaning Sacred Buffalo Stone. The university is located in traditional Blackfoot Confederacy territory. We honor the Blackfoot people and their traditional ways of knowing and caring for this land, as well as all Aboriginal people who have helped shape and continue to strengthen our university community. It is my pleasure to welcome our newly appointed Board of Governors Teaching Chair, a professor of chemistry and biochemistry, a faculty mentor, faculty supervisor, Let's Talk Science, and a founding member of the RNA Research and Training Institute, Professor Ute Kothe. You are welcome.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure to be here with you today and to talk about teaching, which is our joint passion, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. And once again, I say congratulations on your appointment as the Board of Governors Teaching Chair for 2020 to 2022. May we start with you informing us about your background that led you to deciding to come to Lethbridge and to choose teaching.
I was very fortunate in 2006 to come to Lethbridge when they offered me a position where I could combine my research interest with my curiosity about teaching. At that time, I had no teaching experience, I have to confess. I was fortunate because I had learned at a German university that was experimenting with different methods, problem-based learning, experiential learning. So I had seen some innovative teaching, but I had no experience myself. So I was a little bit thrown in a deep pond. But I was also very fortunate coming to Lethbridge because Lethbridge is a university that values teaching. And when I arrived, the teaching center had a new program where they paired us up with mentors. So I'm still today very grateful to my mentor, Jim Zook, who was a retired high school teacher at the time and who accompanied me to one class per week. And I remember January 2007 when I walked into a big lecture hall in U-Hall, and he was there with me once a week to help me refine my teaching. And that was such a wonderful opportunity for me to get feedback, to learn all the little things that make a difference. And it really set me up on a good path. I still had a lot to learn ahead of me, I know that in hindsight, but it was a good start. And it gave me the confidence and knowing that I can ask for help and advice. And I think that's the spirit that you need. Often we're alone in the classroom with the students. So we're not alone, but we don't have colleagues with us. But in reality, we have a great culture here at the University of Lethbridge of supportive colleagues, and that makes all the difference.
That's good. Yeah, most of us, even if you have a background in teaching, coming to a new environment is still a bit scary. But we are very lucky at the University of Lethbridge that all new faculty members are attached to at least one mentor, a senior colleague members who can put us through. I experienced the same thing when I first came in 2009 myself. So it is a shared responsibility for both us and the mentor to see that we are doing a great job. And that is why University of Lethbridge is known for one of the best undergraduate schools in Canada. Can you share with us some experience you have had about teaching to date and how these have improved? Especially, I know you are very passionate about teaching and research as well in guiding students to be successful in their academic career. So can you please give us some hints or some idea about your experience with teaching?
So teaching goes together with learning, right?
Beautiful.
And I think in my experience over the last 15 years, my focus has shifted a lot from thinking about how I teach to thinking about how my students learn, because that's what matters. And I feel every year I get less important but my students become more important. And it's been a gradual change where I also have learn how to facilitate their learning, because that's what I like to say nowadays. I'm not so much teaching as facilitating student learning, helping them to learn. That's my role. And it really puts the student up and center. And it has been a journey from being a lecturer in the beginning, because that's what we traditionally are used to and do, to realizing that I really have to provide my students with opportunities for active learning.
Beautiful. Thank you for going that way. Now, because I'm very interested in how you have been able to flip your classroom, especially with this online virtual presentation, how that has been working well for you.
Yeah, so you mentioned the keyword flipped classroom. That was an adventure I started 5 years ago, and again by inspiration from colleagues that I knew through the teaching center, through the Instructional Skills Workshops, where I had realized I had to do something a little more drastic than small elements changed in my teaching. So flipped classroom means that I decided that my students can actually have their lectures at home, and they can learn their content at home. They don't need me for that. So I started to make videos of the lectures, which means that I didn't have to lecture at all when we're meeting in the classroom. And instead, I figured that in the classroom, we can use the time for active learning, for practicing, for clarifying questions, so what they used to do alone at home. So each week, I would give them practice assignments, questions that are really helping them to check their understanding, and also helping them to prepare for the exams. And they would work in groups, and I would help them to get through the questions, answer their questions. So all of a sudden, all the learning was driven by the students. I was giving them the assignment, but then they had to take it from there. And it was eye-opening for me to see where they struggled, what they knew, what they didn't know. I got a much better understanding of their background knowledge, for example. And that it took a little while to refine it, but it was worthwhile. Well, and now we are online. So it's very different again. But I feel that the flipped classroom model works quite well. Because first, I was fortunate to have many videos already. I think that saved me a lot of time this year. I had to make some more, but I also knew how to make videos so that my students can continue to watch videos about the lectures at home whenever they have time. They comment that they like seeing them several times. That's a bit scary for me, but I think it's good for them, right? They can easily review the material that way. And when they come to our online meetings, we basically do the same as before. We do group work, we work on assignments, and I'm really there to answer their questions and to guide their learning and to clarify their understanding. And I feel that in principle it works. We still have to all get used to the environment. We all have to learn how to interact when we sit in front of a computer instead of a classroom. But there is interaction, and that's what I like. We do learn together. We still have that feeling that we are not isolated, but it's, a challenge we tackle together, and that is important to me. And I think my students see that too, that we are in this together, and we'll learn together how to do it. In the end, we also learn biochemistry together.
Yeah, that's very good, because now that you have already been used to preparing short videos for your student, that will make it easier for you translating from face-to-face to online, where we find ourselves now. Unlike for some of us who have not been using video, although I've prepared blended materials for students to listen, to prepare them for the class in the past. But majority of us, we are just into the idea of online learning environment. We are not used to it. So how have you found the online learning compared to the face-to-face?
Well, I see two challenges that we are learning to address. And again, it's a joint learning experience. The first one is simply technology. There is great technology out there. Lucky us, we are living in these times. We have internet, we have laptops, and most of the time it's reasonably stable and functional. But there are a lot of software programs to learn, how to administer exams online. So there's just a lot of technology to learn. But once you've learned it, it's very helpful. I'm grateful for it. And I think that's the spirit we have at the university. We're here to learn new things. So let's learn new software. We can do that. And fortunately, we have a tremendous help by the Teaching Center. They have offered so many workshops this summer, so much guidance. And this is really important because that means we are not in this alone. So technology is a challenge, but I think it's one we can tackle, and we have gone long ways already. And the university has been very proactive in preparing for that over the summer, both in terms of resources and money, but also just people and collegiality. The second challenge is the isolation, right? Because we are sitting at home, we are not meeting on campus, and that is something which is missing. And it enables learning when you feel supported and part of a team. And that's where pedagogy comes in. That's where we have, as teachers, use the technology to create at least some feeling of connectedness and interaction and engagement between the students, because it also motivates them. And I can see in my students how they are slowly adapting, how they appreciate every interaction that they can get. Yeah. I think with some learning also on my side on how to do that, we can get there too. But again, it's a joint learning experience for all of us. You know, what is the best? How do we manage small group work online? How can I help without seeing a large room? How can we communicate? What is the best way? Email, Moodle, Zoom, there are different ways, chats, what works, what doesn't work. But we are learning, and that's what matters in the end of the day. We are all learning.
That's good, because that interaction is what is missing, the closeness to the student. But since technology has been able to assist us or support us to create some way of making this happen in our class. One thing you mentioned during your discussion is ISW, Instructional Skills Workshop, and the Facilitator Development Workshop. I know you have been so much involved with the Teaching Center on this. Can you please give us some, highlight some further information on your experience with ISW as a facilitator and how you started with the Teaching Center?
Well, again, I was fortunate. This is actually the second key moment, I think, in my teaching time at the University of Lethbridge, that as a very young faculty member, I was invited to attend a video series. And then I was encouraged by Robin Bright, which is a fantastic person, I really have to give her lots of credit, to apply to become a teaching fellow at a time when I was only here for 3 years. And I would have never had been brave enough to do it myself. Well, little did I know that she invited me to become a teaching fellow, because at the same year, she initiated the Instructional Skills Workshops, and all teaching fellows were more or less mandated to attend, which was scary. It was scary like hell. We didn't know what we were doing. We were put in a room for 4 days with 5 people that we didn't know. And it was intense, and it was the best experience of my life. I really have to say, in that workshop, I found friends for life. I also should mention Sheila McManus here, who has been the previous Board of Governors teaching chair, same as Robin Bright, because we had this experience of exchanging and learning together on a very high level. And that's where the Instructional Skills Workshops are instrumental, because they're personalized. They help you to refine your own teaching style as you need it. They help you to understand the role of the student, which for me is the most important, because you get to be the learner when your colleagues teach. And it's an eye-opening experience to sit there and to realize how it feels like to be the learner. And that helped me to really focus more on the learning and the learner, and to put the active learning at the center of my pedagogy. And then, because I was so convinced by the model after the 5 days, and I had also found great friends and colleagues, I immediately volunteered for the next step, which is the Facilitator Development Workshop with the same group, which allows us now in Lethbridge to have these workshops ongoing. So the facilitators are qualified to run these workshops. And I'm telling you that because you know it all, but I think it's important for our audience to hear this.
Yes,
Because I remember
please go
also
ahead.
with great pleasure that in the first ISW I instructed, you were next door in the other ISW, right? That's how we met, through this workshop. And I think that illustrates what a community has been built through this series of workshops over the last years. The other thing I really like about the Instructional Skills Workshops, now that I am regularly facilitating them, it's team-based learning and teaching. We are always two co-facilitators, and it really opened my eyes to how much nicer it is to do together than to be alone, how much we can complement each other with different experience and different talents, and how you really need these two people to sense the room, to pay attention, to really support. And I wish we could do that more often. I really like the team-based instruction, I have to say.
That's good. And as you know, I'm very grateful to all of you that have sat together to plan the ISW. I gained a lot when I took the course myself. I took it with Sheila and Wayne. And after that, I was advised to take FDW also, and I now facilitated my first Instructional Skills Workshop last year with Leanne. It was a great experience. And with my plan or the way I render my lectures in my class, I use team-based learning because that's what my mentor introduced me to when I came to the University of Lebanon in 2009. Now, that team-based learning, I now discovered that Jan Newberry has been using it in a very big classroom. My own is maximum of 60. She now uses it with 300 students. So we now compare notes. Unfortunately, we just published a paper in summer this year with Jeff Meadows on comparing team-based learning in statistics and in anthropology. How do we share our experience? That's why I still appreciate the Instructional Skills Workshop, the way it was organized, and how you learn how to work with colleagues. That was very interesting. So how has the Instructional Skills Workshop changed your approach to teaching?
The Instructional Skill Workshop was my inspiration to flip my classroom.
Beautiful.
And that is my way to really put the active learning up in center. And I use a lot of group work in my flipped classrooms because the students always work in groups on the assignments. And I think I really learned the power of the small groups. As soon as you have 4 or 5 people together, you have a critical mass of different expertise and different personalities that can really push everybody in the group. And I see that over and over again in my class, how well that works. It requires building trust. It requires building good habits of working together. So I learn more and more that that's my role. My expertise in biochemistry almost doesn't count as much anymore, but the experience I got from the ISWs and how to facilitate, how to connect, how to combine talent, how to recognize the strengths of the students and use it to their own advantage. I think that's something I really only appreciated through the Instructional Skills Workshops, and it's been eye-opening to see how much I can learn from colleagues from different disciplines, because I think the content in the discipline, it almost moves to the back. It's taken for granted, but how we enable the learning, how we use these soft skills, but they are so important to really advance in your discipline and beyond your discipline. Exactly. That's really where the ISW has been inspiration, and learning from my students and with my students and being brave to experiment, because that's also what the ISW does. In the ISW, we try out new teaching approaches in mini lessons. And I remember, for example, being in an ISW with Lisa Doolittle from Arts, and she's an expert in drama. And afterwards, I actually went into my biochemistry class and we tried a little play. It failed utterly, but it was fun. And it's the attitude of try it out, and when it fails, just laugh and try something else next time. And the students appreciate that spirit. They don't blame me for trying, because I think they appreciate that I'm willing to find out what's best for them. And they also know then that if something doesn't work, they can tell me and we'll try something out new. And thereby we can iteratively refine for all of us. And I think that's a very important attitude that you need to develop. But you need some confidence and support from colleagues to be able to do this.
Yeah, I'm always working with teams, the staff at the teaching center, to give me ideas, especially now putting students at the center of the learning to take control, responsibility. I was afraid at the beginning, but now students are enjoying it, and they are very grateful because that requires some level of trust that they can do it and to give them the confidence. So that's something I've learned also from the ISWU. And now that we have discussed about ISWU and facilitator development, now let's look at the experiential learning approach. Because I've heard a lot about your lab, how you have been able to support students. What is experiential learning to you?
Experiential learning for me is the logic next step building on active learning. As I mentioned before, in my classrooms and active learning modes, I see more and more often how important it is to know your discipline, but also to know how to use your knowledge, how to interact with your classmates, with your colleagues, how to apply it, how to problem solve, how to manage your own time. And all of these skills matter a lot. And I think we're trying our best to do that in a classroom, but it's still a very structured, confined setting, right? For me, the best setting to really play with these experiences and play as a way to learn and refine them in the sciences, in my case, is the research lab. And I have always 3, sometimes up to 5 undergraduates in my research lab who work alongside the graduate students on a research project. At first, that's daunting for them. They think about the research being difficult, but we can guide them through it, right? You learn new recipes and new techniques, and you get support because it's embedded in a team. So from the very beginning, the students learn how to work in a team, how to coordinate their work with the work of the others. They need to book equipment. They have to arrange who can help them when, and they interact. They have to express themselves. They have to explain the experiments. They have to communicate the science, but they also have to communicate the teamwork. So there's a lot of communication skills. There are time management skills. And then usually you're at some point where the experiments don't work. That happens because we do research. It's new. Yeah. Nobody has done it before. So when you explore the unknown, sometimes you stumble and you encounter something you didn't expect. And then they have to learn how to deal with the frustration. That's also a skill, unfortunately, we have to learn in life, and we can't protect our students from that. We really have to help them to get through it, but not to ignore or sidestep or say, I'll stop here, but to just, face the problem and try to tackle it by coming up with good ideas and bad ideas, trying them out, finding out which ones were the good ones and the bad ones, and finding out where to get advice and overcome these challenges. Yeah. And I think the exact experiment in that case might not even matter. They'll probably never do it again in their life. But the experience of having overcome a problem that was their problem and nobody else's because it was their project, and they, with help of others, were able to overcome it, I think that's also very critical. And then they also present in lab meetings, so they have to give a presentation. In the end, they have to write a report, so they get more formal communication skills, both orally and written. And as they progress and maybe come back for an undergraduate thesis, they get larger projects where they might have to plan their own experiments. They might not be told, now you have to do this, but they get asked, what is the next step? How can you find out whether? And they learn to think bigger and bigger and bigger. And they also see the graduate students tackle bigger projects. And that's the one thing I also really like about the research lab, that it's learning across stages and working together as a team that's heterogeneous, where we have people that are different experiences, we have people that have different personalities, we have people that come from different countries, that speak different languages, and all of this comes together in a team where each person matters, each person has value in an own project, but it's still part of a whole that's bigger than the pieces. And it's hard to explain that, but it's very satisfying to work one-on-one with the students to see their growth. It comes gradually, but when you look back, it's always amazing. And sometimes I have to remind my students, I say, remember that first week when you knew nothing? Don't complain that, the machine is not working because you've learned so much in the last year. And they look back and say, right? I forgot. I forgot how little I knew.
Yeah, that's good. So I know that you work a lot with independent study students and undergraduates doing honors thesis. What has been your experience with these students?
Well, everyone has been a pleasure, and I think it's great at the University of Lethbridge that we have these research opportunities because it gives the students an opportunity to try out what they like. And I've had students that have gone all the way. Right now I have, for example, a PhD student who was in my third year class, started with an independent study, liked it, continued with an honors thesis, and at each step it wasn't clear. And she thought about what would be next, and then she did her master's, transferred to the PhD. We've been working together for 5 years.
That's good.
And that is, as a teacher, a great experience because you truly see your students grow over time, right? And it's just the biggest reward I think you can have. I also had other students who maybe stayed with me for a year or so and then moved on to med school. Some of them have stayed in touch. It's nice to hear then how they say, the starting at the Lethbridge has enabled them to go beyond.
That's good.
And some have chosen other paths. And then I also think it was worthwhile to try it out. And then also have a defined end of an independent study where you can try out another lab or another experience. Because if you try it out as an undergrad student, that's the best. Once you accept a job offer, you're sort of tied to it a little bit, right? But I feel students need to have that opportunity to try out, and sometimes you only experience what you like after you've tried it out, because you don't know up front how it's like to be in a research lab. And every research lab is different, and every career path is different. So giving students this opportunity to try out and really experience what they like or don't like, I think is very valuable.
So thank you for the conversation so far. I'm now taking you in a new direction. As the new Board of Governors Teaching Chair, you have a research which I'm aware of, and I'm very much interested in learning more about that research. Can you please give us a brief introduction to what you plan to do during your 2-year tenure?
Well, thank you for bringing this topic up, Olu. It's close to my heart because during my 2-year term as Board of Governors Teaching Chair, I really want to focus on graduate education and supervision at the University of Lethbridge. And before I go into what I want to do, I want to provide a bit of a high-level background of why.
Yep.
Because graduate student education and supervision has grown significantly in the last years. The University of Lethbridge is a comprehensive university with a very strong research component in addition to the teaching component. And this is tied together through graduate education because the graduate students learn by doing research, but it's an education. It's not a means to an end to just produce research papers, but really to prepare the students for careers. And it's a very interesting way of learning and teaching, very experiential, very individualized, very independent, and very high level. So in the end of the day, what it means to do graduate studies is that after your bachelor degree, you stay for another 2 years to do a master and another 4 years to do a PhD. And most people say, why the heck would you do that? Another 6 years of education. But the key is really that through this training on the go, almost what it is, you make people truly independent. And it's, for me, very rewarding, it's very challenging, but the goal is almost to help students become colleagues, right? They enter graduate studies coming out of the bachelor, so they are like your students, but ideally at the end of a PhD, they're your peers, they're your colleagues. Yep. They can go out in the world and do basically anything they want. That's what I sometimes tell them. That's the goal, that you have the skills and abilities and the confidence to do whatever you want. So it's not tied to a specific area or subject anymore, but it's a broad skill set.
Exactly. That would be some form of encouragement to tell our undergraduate students to maybe consider. Just try it. Because I've seen some of them, when you teach in class, they tell you, no, I'm done. But after a few months, they said, Olu, I'm considering coming back. I said, yeah, it's a good decision. Just let's see how far you can go with it. Just start. And they develop the interest. Please go ahead.
But to achieve this goal, right, you have to enable learning in a very different way. So graduate education looks very different from undergraduate education.
Exactly.
The students take some courses, but the majority of the learning happens through a research project. They usually work with a faculty supervisor, so it's a very close relationship, very intense on both sides, and very flexible. And that is an opportunity and a challenge at the same time. Now, before going into those details of how graduate education works, I want to step back and say at the University of Lethbridge, in the last 15 years that I've been here, I've seen a tremendous growth in graduate studies education supervision. I think it's becoming a strength of our university, maybe a secret still, but definitely some that's coming out there. We had a very strong enrollment growth in graduate studies, for example, just this year, despite the pandemic. This is really the area of growth here. But I also feel that it's an area that deserves more attention because it is of utter importance. It's very high quality, it's challenging, and it relies on this very tight relationship between the student and the supervisor or mentor. And I feel that we need to really look in whether or not we are providing the best support possible for both the grad students and the supervisors to achieve the best. And because it's, again, sort of an isolated almost situation, I feel that we should achieve the same that we do with the undergrad teaching, where we bring people together to learn from our experiences. So now I'm coming to my project as Board of Governors teaching chair. What I really want to do is two steps. It's a research project, but I hope I'll go beyond research, because here the research is really just a stepping stone. So in my first year, I want to focus on the research, and that is to really assess on a broader level how we are doing in Lethbridge. I've begun already to ask the graduate students, what is their experience when it comes to supervision? What do they like, what works, what are the challenges, and how we are doing. There's some past data on that as well, but I feel we should pair the general data with the specific data. And we have some special challenges right now, of course, with the pandemic, because again, many grad students are working from home or under non-ideal circumstances. So the relationship to the supervisor is ever more important. The next step this year is to also ask the supervisors, how are they feeling? What do they need? Are they supported? Because again, many of us arrive at the University of Lethbridge, and while we have been graduate students ourselves, we usually don't have experience supervising. So we try it out, but I feel again, there might be the opportunity to just be a little bit more efficient and supportive. And so based on these two research steps in the first year of really asking the graduate students and the supervisors what they need and how it's going, I hope that in the second year we can maybe start to build some resources together with the teaching center to provide additional support and to bring people together. I think that's a theme I've really learned from the ISWs and my undergrad teaching, is that together we are stronger. If we share experience, we don't have to repeat the same mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a culture that we should promote even more. It often exists in departments, right, with close colleagues. But again, I think it will benefit if we cross-pollinate that across the different units on campus, because I know graduate education looks a bit different in different disciplines, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from each other. In contrary, we might learn something very valuable if we look a little bit beyond.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very interesting. So I look forward to working with you on the project as well. And I know many of our past Board of Governors teaching chairs have been saying we are interested in the graduate education on campus, improving what can we do to help, what can we do to support. And I know people are looking forward to that research and any intervention that may be coming up soon. Yeah, because I know that the graduate school also have been offering many workshops to support faculty and students as well. That's why University of uLethbridge has been one of the very rare schools that have been coming forward, supporting students, supporting faculty at the graduate level, expanding research. With your experience in the last 15 years that you have been here, how do you think we can tackle the problem of mental health among graduate students and even stress among the faculty members?
I think you nailed the question here, right? When I say it's stressful and challenging to really provide high-level education at the graduate level, it has these two components. It is stressful for the students because they work in an unstructured environment, and often they work alone. And that isolation is dangerous. And it's not helpful to their learning either. There are ways to make it team-based, and we need to see how to explore that best. And that's just only one element. But same as on the undergrad level, we've really seen the last years that the mental health challenge has increased. I don't think we fully understand why. But the important point is to acknowledge it, to really understand that our students are struggling and to do our part to support them. We might not be able to solve it. We might not be the only factor in the equation, but I think we are one factor in the equation, and we have to play our part to really support our students. And on the same side, sometimes the supervisors are isolated, right? They have a difficult student, they are standing there. Sometimes it's not easy to confess that you're struggling and how to supervise because you want to be perceived as competent. And so that's also a bit of a culture we need to develop. And it's also often on top of our other duties, right? We get often the undergrad teaching gets counted and measured. The research output gets counted and measured.
Exactly.
But the graduate education is in between, and it's maybe the most important, but you can't count and measure it as easily. And it's many hours every week of interacting, right? And then you can count maybe the thesis at the end, but you know, the way to get there, that's, I think, what matters even more than the thesis at the end. So we need to talk about workload, we need to talk about support, we need to talk about recognition, and we need to do it together. And so you mentioned the School of Graduate Studies is instrumental, and I've already worked with them in the first piece of my study. The teaching center is instrumental for the education side. We need to work together also with the Office of the Research, Vice President Research, because it is intimately connected there. And then, of course, the Vice President Academic, I feel, plays an important role. So I hope that I can bring all of these units together, seeing the common interests and finding the synergies, because I think that's how you can truly move forward, right? To create these synergies and not isolated programs that focus on one or the other, but really tying it together, and that one unit knows what the other is doing and everybody can contribute. The dean's office are important too when they evaluate us, for example, to think about what it means, how to evaluate what is good graduate student supervision. We talk about that a lot with undergraduates. Yeah. How do we evaluate undergraduate teaching? We also need to talk about how do we evaluate graduate teaching. And I don't think we have really started that conversation yet.
Fully agree with
and
you.
That's not so much part of a research project, but about bringing people together. And in uLethbridge, I think we have a good chance of doing that because we are at that sweet spot. We're big enough, but we know each other well. And I hope we can really build upon that. And now is the time where we have challenges. We are restructuring. We're changing how we operate. But let's do that in a way looking forward to also create something better. Because it's a time where we are not afraid anymore of change. Because we have to change anyway. We have no choice.
Yeah.
But do it in a good way. Do it considerate. Do it together. That's what I hope we can achieve in the next 2 years as a starting point. But I think it will continue. It's nothing we can do in 2 years. And I hope I'm just a catalyst and there will be many people contributing because I think we share a lot of interest there and a lot of needs as well.
I completely agree with you that we need to start thinking ahead with the situation that we are facing, even with the economic situation in the province. How can we move ahead? How can we still continue growing our graduate program, our research programs? What can we do? And it will be impossible for us to do it individually. We have to come together as a body, because sharing our ideas, we learn from each other, exchanging how to move forward. Especially my passion has been to support the graduate student when they are going through this stressful period. What can we do? I've been recommending some of them, directing them to the counseling center, because the counseling center, they are always able and they are ready to support the graduate students as well. I know the School of Graduate Studies are putting all hands on the table. They are trying their best. And with the new Dean of Graduate Studies and the Associate Vice President Research, she's working with the staff members to make sure that they continue pushing the graduate education at the University of ULethbridge forward. So what I'm now talking in relationship to your project, because I know you are very passionate about giving the best to the students. What do you think we can still add to what we are doing now to be able to speak to the people out there or to interested students out there to invite them to choose University of ULethbridge in comparison to other universities in Alberta?
Well, thank you for that very important question. It's a complex one. There are many answers that need to come together to really further grow the size and the quality of graduate education in ULethbridge, where we are on a very good path. We are really operating from, I think, a strong basis, but there's room to grow. And I think what one needs to understand is the integrated nature of graduate education. So one key step, for example, to really further improve graduate education is to grow the research at the University of ULethbridge, and that has multiple benefits. The more research we do, the better research we do, the more attractive we are for graduate students. And I think also the community will see that we can do very impactful, very important research that benefits the local community in Southern Alberta, but really it benefits humans around the world when we speak about some of the things that are being researched here, right? And I mean, I'm from the sciences, but there, whatever we find is important for in biomedical areas affects the health of people around the world. So it's not tied to Southern Alberta, but no. I think it's key to understand that research has a long-term benefit, but doing high-quality research also means that we can attract the best graduate students. Okay. We have graduate students from around the world. It's an international experience. We are truly a destination university in graduate education. I think we have to do a little better attracting students from North America. I have to say, we have a very strong group of local students in graduate education that we trained at the University of ULethbridge, and they're sometimes the best of the best. But it's also interesting to enrich the experience by having diversity in the graduate student pool. Being really good in research also means that we attract funding. And we need the research funding for many reasons. To keep the research going, to support the university because it brings in money, and we use the research funding to pay our graduate students research stipends. That has to be said loud and clear, because it's a means to support the graduate students and their education. I think it's one of the most important things we do. So every time we celebrate research, we have to think that we're also celebrating graduate education. So that tight link has to be there. But it's more than research, right? It's more than just completing a project and publishing about it. It's also providing the graduate students with the additional skills. We have already lots of workshops, both through the School of Graduate Studies and the Teaching Center for graduate students. They have developed a strong program, Thrive, for professional skills, which is fantastic. I think we have to embed that a little bit more also in their research experience, so it's not separate programs but integrated. I do think we need to do a little more to support the supervisors and to give them the recognition and to find the synergies there. And we need to maybe get even better in communicating about it to the people in ULethbridge and Southern Alberta and beyond about the success stories of our graduate students. I've been really proactive the last years, for example, to nominate my students for the Shining Student Spotlight, just to illustrate what they're doing, because it's sometimes hard for the graduate students too to explain what they're doing. Yes. And the graduate students have to get these skills. So we should actually put our graduate students out and let them practice to explain why it is so important and support them in doing that. Because they are actually our ambassadors. They are the people who we send out into the world after they have received their master's or PhD degrees. And I really think they are a testament to the quality of education here. And I think we should give them a little more attention.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. And that's part of the 3MT programs, to be able to instill that confidence in our graduate students. You should be able to explain what you have done for 2 years in 3 minutes. They put them on the hot spot and they are able to give their best. That's one of the programs that I think we should give accolade to. Because, and apart from that, the teaching center have been doing a lot in preparing them, some of them that will be staying in the classroom, doing 1 week, I think, boot camp, and it's very tough. I've seen students who said, Olu, the teaching center have drilling us. I said, yeah, it's good to be drilled, so that will make you more efficient and more effective teacher if you decide to stay in academics. Also, the library giving lectures on EndNote, how to use the EndNote for referencing and supporting even the CAMA video that they now make available to all graduate students, those that are interested in mixed method research, quantitative, qualitative. All these videos are now available. So all this software that they are making available to students, I think, is very helpful in pushing the graduate program forward. With the new science building, how are you finding the place?
Well, we moved into the new science building last summer. It was exciting. It was a challenge too. It was an exercise in teamwork. I mean, hundreds of people work together to make this possible. But what I like about the new science building is that it really enables working together much more, because we are no longer in small rooms behind walls and closed doors, which used to be the case. So nobody knew what the grad students are doing. And now when you walk into the science building, you see into the labs, you see the students working, you see the students interacting, you see the students walking around. And I think that's just so much more inspiring and also important to give recognition to the students, because you also see them working late nights or on weekends or early in the morning, right? To use the equipment the best, because sometimes the equipment is really expensive, so they really use it, almost 24 hours to make the best out of it. This transparency is important also in terms of recognition, so that the graduate students are seen. And that's what I meant when I said they need to get the attention, because they're also very important members of the university community, and not just as students that are learning, but as actively contributing to research. And the other aspect that you mentioned, and I haven't and I should, is the graduate students are actively contributing to teaching at the university. Yep. They typically hold teaching assistantships in the sciences. They teach the labs, they teach tutorials for undergraduates, they help the marking. They are there for the undergrads, and they are such an important bridge because they are more accessible for the undergraduates. They remember their own struggles because it's just been a few years, and I think we could not do high-level teaching without the graduate students. And the graduate students get some experience in teaching, which they may need when they go on into academia, but they also got experience in supervising others, training others, instructing others. And I think wherever you go in your life later, when you work, you will have co-workers, you might have a new colleague whom you have to help get along. And so you need these skills, right? They are very transferable, and it's part of the graduate education package, again, that the graduate students get these experiences, but we also need to appreciate what they're doing for us and need to see that that is also a very valuable contribution to the life of a university. And I could not imagine being at a university without grad students, I have to say, because I feel they are filling such an important role.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Now I want to switch gear back to undergraduate, because part of the roles of the faculty is to mentor the graduate students. And you are now saying that the graduate students we are involving them in teaching, and they are indirectly mentoring the undergraduate student. Now I will ask, in terms of critical thinking, how do you see this playing a role in the undergraduate classes and as well as the graduate level, and the issue of mentoring or mentorship program at the University of Lethbridge. Because, the mentorship program was started by the Teaching Center 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It has been, but not formally established. And Greg did it as for his teaching fellow project. I remember that. And now it has been improving that faculty are mentoring faculties, and as well, graduate students are mentoring undergraduate students. So when we look at the issue of challenging the students critically, that is giving the work back to them. It is your responsibility. Now own your learning. How do you see this coming together?
Yes, I think mentorship is one of the best ways to learn. It goes beyond facilitating and experiential learning and involves both sides. The mentee is learning, but the mentor as well. And yes, as you mentioned, we have a great new mentorship model on the faculty and instructor level that's more formalized now. But informally, the entire university is a web of mentoring, right? Like I mentor my graduate students and the undergraduates in my lab. But importantly, for example, all the undergraduates in my lab also paired with a grad student. So the grad student also mentors the undergrad in the lab. It's supervision, mentoring, coaching, all of that together, which is an informal relationship. When the grad students TA, the TA-ships, the teaching assistantships, it's a little more formal. And the important consideration for me is two ways. For the mentee, it opens doors. It lowers barriers. It's easier to ask a question if you have a one-on-one relationship with somebody who is more experienced. And that's why we need to bring these different generations together. That's why we can't just teach in the third year, in the fourth year as sort of a close cohort. We need to mix it up. And that's what I referred to you earlier, what I like about the research experience, because it is a team of different experience. But we do that too when we bring the graduate student teaching assistantships into the classrooms, right? We provide that opportunity for the undergrads to talk to a peer who is just a little bit ahead of them, where it's easier to relate. And the same again for the graduate students to the faculty. They have now grown a bit in experience, and it gets easier for them every year to talk and to openly explore problems and questions, right? And so is it for us when we start here as being young faculty members. It's a bit intimidating, and right? So that's the mentee side. What I've learned though over the last years, and it was eye-opening, I think the biggest effect is on the mentor side. You learn so much from mentoring somebody else because you have to start questioning your own assumptions, taking a different perspective, thinking about a problem that you wouldn't have thought about before because you didn't encounter it. And that's where true critical thinking starts, when you take it out of your box and really ask to provide meaningful advice. I find it sometimes challenging myself still. But it's very rewarding. That's where I see for the graduate students how they truly grow. And a simple example, when you have to explain a research experimental approach to an undergrad, well, you realize what you did not understand, right? And if you've explained it 3 or 4 or 5 times, then you've really filled all the gaps in your own understanding. And that's just a small example, but it really makes you a critical, independent thinker. It also tells you maybe I should go back and look up again, and then teaches you to be independent, but also build the confidence to trust your abilities. If I don't remember this, I can go back and look it up and I will understand it. I can teach myself. If there's this new problem I've never heard about, I can still learn and maybe guide somebody by asking questions. Not by having answers, but maybe by just helping with what are the critical questions. Having a conversation, having an exchange and often you find the answer together. Not on your own, but through that interaction. And that is critical thinking for me. And it's enabled and is dependent on strong relationships. And we need to enable them at the University of Lethbridge. And I think we are doing, and the more we do, the better.
That's good. That's good. Before we round up, I would like to go into another area. Let's talk science. I know you are the faculty supervisor. How have you been able to manage this program?
Let's Talk Science is for me one of those examples where it all comes together, all that we've discussed in the last week. So maybe quickly, Let's Talk Science is an outreach program where we have lots of volunteers, science students, volunteers, both graduates and undergraduate students that go out in the community and share hands-on science activities with children and youth. It's very rewarding. But it's also complex to organize. And today I really want to talk also in particular about the team of graduate student coordinators that is running this project. Okay. And I'm their supervisor, I'm their mentor, I'm their guidance. But I'm not managing this project. Wow. This program is run by the group of currently 5 coordinators. And they have a lot of tasks because they have to recruit volunteers, develop activities, talk to their teachers, buy materials, plan activities, make sure it's all feasible, make sure it's safe, advertise for it, and so on and so forth. It's a long list. It's a complex project. But they learn. It's amazing. And for me, seeing the students grow by doing the science outreach, by having a meaningful program where they see their impact, they get really motivated and inspired to do their best because they're not doing it for themselves. They're doing it for the community. And they struggle sometimes because setting up a big event is not easy. You have to think of so many things that you think, I never done that as a scientist. How do I order food on campus? How do I coordinate this with safety services? How do I write a press release? But that's what you need as skills when you enter the job market, right? If you have any interesting position where you bring together people, where you respond to needs of your community, those are the skills you need. And I think the Let's Talk Science program is a wonderful opportunity to try this out in a very, very meaningful way, because in the end of the day, we're giving back to the community. We're inspiring the next generation of students for science to either become scientists or to appreciate science, because that's also what I hope that many people realize, science is useful. Now in the pandemic, we couldn't do without science solving these issues. And the graduate students are really helping to share that with the teachers, the parents, the kids in Lethbridge and in Southern Alberta.
Wow, that's an interesting explanation about Let's Talk Science. Yeah, I know many youths, young ones, are involved in this program. And I will say thank you very much for creating time to be with us today. And I wish you a successful tenure as the Board of Governors Teaching Chair at the University of Lethbridge. Thank you for joining us for the Ed Talks today. Thank you.